Welcome to the new edition of Beyond the Score, MississippiScoreboard.com. Today's guest is Rick Cleveland, longtime sports writer in Mississippi. Don't think you'll want to miss this one.
Visit the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame and Museum, where legends come to live. Open 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Saturday.
Rick Cleveland, it is a pleasure to have you here on MississippiScoreboard.com's Beyond the Score episode. I've been waiting for this one.
I've seen you interview 1 million people. I'm scared to be on the other side.
No, you'll do fine. I got a feeling. You know, we're here at the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. We want to thank Bill Blackwell for allowing us to use this great facility. And I know this place is close to your heart.
Oh, absolutely.
You were executive director here for 4 years, 2011, 2015. When you walk into this place, what sort of emotions and thoughts run through your mind?
Well, you know, what made this, the reason that I left the Clarion Ledger and came here was because so many of the people that I had covered through the years were inducted here, and I had written so many stories and columns about them, and you know, I thought it was really important that their stories continue to be told for future generations, and that's what this place does. I mean, all the history of, it's an incredible history of Mississippi sports for a state so small and relatively poor, has produced such a huge percentage of the world's greatest athletes.
Why do you think that is, Rick?
I don't know. I've talked to well, the main guy I've talked to a lot about it is Archie Manning, because he's one of them.
Yeah.
And his you know, basically he said that it's because it's so important in small town Mississippi. Sports is what the towns rally around. The two most important days of the week are Friday nights and Sunday mornings, you know, and there's not much difference between the devotion to either one. Both of them are really, really important.
That's right.
You know, and he thinks that's it. I'm not sure. I mean, I wish I knew, but I do think that has something to do with it.
You know, you think about it, every county in Mississippi probably has a guy they could put out there, and he or she could stand up against anybody across the country. My little county, Noxubee County, Bubba Phillips.
Yeah.
You know, pretty good ball player in his day.
Football, baseball, and later on, after he retired from baseball, he took up tennis and became an age group champion at every level that he played till he died.
There you go.
He was just an incredible athlete. Yeah. Really good friend of my daddy's. One of my favorite stories is I'm watching him play Game 6 of the World Series in 1959. I can't remember what day of the week it was, but the next night he was in our kitchen, and Dad grilled steaks, and we ate with him the next night. Bubba Phillips.
I got his baseball card. That's as close as I ever came to meeting him. I never got a chance to meet him.
Yeah, they called him around Hattiesburg. They called him Bubber, with a ER instead of a A. Bubber Phillips. And he, yeah, you know the story about why he ended up at then Mississippi Southern.
I've heard it, but
it's on one of these kiosks over here. He was on his way to LSU. He was on a bus he changed buses from Macon to Hattiesburg to Baton Rouge, and the bus stopped in Hattiesburg, and he was supposed to change buses. Well, he never got on that bus to Baton Rouge because somebody in Macon had called the football office at Southern and said, he's changing buses there. Y'all got one last shot at him. And as my daddy always told the story, Bubba's suitcases made it to Baton Rouge, but he never did. They had to send a manager down to Baton Rouge to get his stuff.
I think the people just got a glimpse of what I've been able to and had the pleasure of seeing for years now, is that you know Mississippi sports like nobody else I know. And you know all the small towns. And I think people, I know you've written about it, but I always think it's cool that when you go to the Mississippi state football playoffs, your favorite game is always the 1A game.
Absolutely. But it goes back to what we were saying about what Archie said about it being important. Because there's nothing more, when a little 1A team, like used to be Mize is now 2A or 3. The best game I've ever covered, period, was a Weir, W-E-I-R, Mize football game. 1A game back in about 1995, something like that. And you know, it goes down to the wire, and there's a little 125-pound cornerback who gets his shoulder separated, and the coach Junior Graham won't let him go back in the game because he can't move his arm, and the kid's crying wanting to go back in the game. And then they lose on the last play of the game, and the heartbreak on one side and the joy on the other. It's different at that level than it is, to me it is anyway.
You hadn't missed a 1A game and
I hadn't missed one in a long time. Yeah, I love those 1A games, and I don't watch from the press box either. I get a sideline pass and go down, and I'll do one side one half and one side the other half, and you know, you got kids playing, key players playing, that if they were at Madison Central or Oxford or Oak Grove or schools like that, they'd just be, as the coaches said, they'd just be walking the hallways. They wouldn't, you know, like I say, this team had a 100, I think he weighed about 118, and his position was cornerback, but every once in a while they'd put him in at nose guard, and nobody could block him. You know, he was too quick.
I don't know, we've been friends for 45 years, I guess, now. And I don't know that I've ever asked you this. Well, what if you had not grown up as Ace Cleveland's son and been exposed to, you know, sports writing and all that, what do you think you would have done in life?
Might have been a teacher, or either history or English teacher, probably.
Really?
Yeah. The older I get, the more I love history. One reason, that was another reason why I came here for those 4 years, is because I love just the history of it. And I read a lot of history. And I think that might have been, it was only two things in school that I was good at. So.
Math not one of them?
Well, math I was good at till you had to start finding X, and I never could find that booger.
X is sneaky.
Yeah. I never could. I learned to do, you know, all the, I guess what you call simple math, from doing batting averages and earned run averages and all that growing up.
Box scores.
Learned to reading the sports page.
Yeah.
You know. So.
But being exposed to sports at such a young age, how old were you when you sort of knew this is the path you wanted to take?
Well, I knew sports was the path I wanted to take from the time I can remember anything. I knew sports writing was probably it when they started throwing curves in baseball, and I couldn't touch it. Because, you know, I wanted, every kid wanted to be the next Mickey Mantle, you know. And it became evident about age 10 or 11 that that wasn't going to happen. And I actually started writing sports for the Hattiesburg American when I was 13. 13. I had to take I didn't know, you know, I had to learn how to type. So I took a summer school typing class at Southern, at the college. And when I was 13 now, I was tiny. I was weighed about 95 pounds, and walk in those college classrooms with all those much bigger, older people. That was interesting. But I learned how to type, and then I just started covering games as a stringer.
I remember you told me that your dad gave you a couple of real pieces of jewels as advice. And I remember one of them was get the score right.
Yeah, get the score right. Yeah. And I've almost always done that.
You sent me a story not long ago from someone, and it was not in there. The score was not in the story.
Well, yeah, it happens all the time now. You get so wrapped up in trying to tell a story, but you know, our good friend Willie Morris, you know what he did on his first sports story for the Yazoo Herald? He quoted Keats' Ode to a Grecian Urn in his story, but he left out the score.
Willie wasn't much on that.
Yeah, well, I guarantee you that it was a heck of a story.
I bet it was. It was. You were frustrating to me to read you, because I know, and anybody else who has done this for a living knows how hard it is to write a story. I mean, and especially on deadline, or to take a complicated, controversial subject when you're writing a column, and to break it down into a piece where you help people understand it, but you do it in a way that you don't make a lot of people mad. You sort of give both, and I've always admired you for that, but you make it look so easy.
We'll get back to what you were talking about with my dad, the gems that the biggest one he gave me was to try to write it the way you tell it. And when you think about it, if I'm telling a good friend, let's say, if I'm telling you a story, I'm going to start out by telling you something that the most interesting part of it, I want to get your attention.
Yeah.
And then as you continue to tell the story, you if you're doing it in conversation, you kind of do it in a way to try to retain your interest. You try to, and you don't let, you know, when I was getting started out, Ace, my dad, would tell me, don't let the typewriter get in the way. And now it's, don't let the laptop get in the way.
Right.
Just tell the story.
Yeah. And
tell it the way you tell it somebody you know well. And you know, I think too many young sports writers are trying to write to impress either coaches with their knowledge of the game or other sports writers with how brilliant their writing is, and really you're just trying to tell a story to the readers.
You're right.
You know?
Right.
Keep it simple.
But I think that's why you relate so well to your audience, is that you do. And look, writing it simple is much harder than, you know, going off and just doing stream of conscious and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Making it simple and precise for the audience, that's really hard. I've always told people I can write you 2,000 words a lot easier than I can write you 500 words.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the hardest thing, people always ask me, what's the hardest thing about sports writing? And I don't do much of it anymore, but those Saturday night 7 p.m. ESPN games,
Ooh.
you know, where you've got, at the end, when the game's over, you've got 5 or 10 minutes to complete a 700 word column. Now that'll get your attention. That's the 2-minute drill personified.
You know, sports has changed so much, and the way writers cover sports now has changed so much because they don't have the access that we once had. You know, if we wanted to interview a player, we just went to the player and set it up with him. We didn't have to go through sports information most of the time.
Yeah.
But now today, I don't know how they cover the teams.
Particularly during the pandemic, is I've got the same access to the players in my living room I mean, I can get on the Zoom call, you know, the same way anybody else can. I mean, it's crazy. I was trying to write something about Kiffin's debut at Ole Miss and Leach's debut at State and combine it into one column. And it occurred to me while I was watching the game that I actually had a better view of everything in my living room than the people in the press box had, and you know, and I had the same access to Kiffin and Leach and the players that the people at the stadium had. The only thing I didn't have was the atmosphere, which was obviously quite different than a normal SEC opener is, you know.
You know, I want people to know about this. One of the great memories I have as a sports writer was being at Memorial Stadium in 1984 when we had Mississippi Valley and Alcorn there on a Sunday. And that game would not have been played on a Sunday if not for you. Would you mind telling that?
At the time, about a month before the game, it became apparent that they were probably both going to be undefeated and you know, nationally ranked, and when they played. I mean, they were undefeated, and Valley was scoring about 65 points a game, and Totten and Rice were setting records like crazy. And on the other hand, you had Alcorn and Moreno Chasm, the great defensive coach, and they were beating people, you know, like normal football team, 24-0, 24-7. And it became apparent that was going to be a great game, and it was scheduled to be played in Itabena, where Valley had about 8,000 seats. And so I looked at the schedule, and in Jackson we had one of the old SEC doubleheaders. I can't remember who was playing, but State had a game in the afternoon, and Ole Miss had a game at night, and so the stadium was taken for that Saturday. And I just got on the phone and called old Barney Poole, who was the stadium manager, the great Ole Miss New York Giant player, who in later life was the manager at Memorial Stadium. I said, Barney, could they play on Sunday? He said, I don't know if I want to, you know. He's already going to have a really busy Saturday. But he said, yeah, there's no law against it. They could do it. And so I just I called Chasm first. Of course, he was all for it because he didn't want to go to Itabena.
The head coach at Alcorn.
Yeah. Chasm was down at Alcorn. He said, yeah, we'd love to do it. And then I called Archie Cooley, the gunslinger up at Valley, and you know, and I told him, Archie, y'all have 60,000 people. It'll be the biggest payday in the history of either school. And he said, well, I hate to give up that home field advantage, but we can pass that money. And they both agreed to do it. And then they played the game, and there were 64,000 people there. And
it's a great overhead picture of the stadium that day.
Yeah, because you can't see the aisles. People were sitting in the aisles.
No place to sit. No other place to sit.
Yeah, and it was a great game, terrific game, and Alcorn won, and It was the biggest payday in the history of either school. And they showed on statewide TV. Michael Rubenstein put together a network of stations in Mississippi, and they telecast the game, and the ratings outdid the NFL.
And you know, we were both at the Clarion Ledger at the time. We covered that like the Super Bowl. I mean, because all the people, you know, we spread out on Saturday, but we had all our people that day for Sunday, and covered it with, I don't know how many people we had there.
It was a great happening. It was a big day. Yeah, I'm glad it happened. I'm proud that I had a hand in it.
And later that year, you had your vote for the Heisman, and you voted for a guy named Jerry Rice, and some people thought that was sort of odd that you voted for Rice.
I got a call from a talk radio station in Boston. I'm sitting at my desk at the Clarion Ledger, and I answered my phone, and a guy said, "I want to talk to Rick Cleveland," and I said, "This is he," and he said, "Well, you're on live radio in Boston." And he said, "I read something where you voted for Jerry Rice for the Heisman Trophy instead of Doug Flutie," and I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Well, why did you do that?" And I said, "Because it says you vote for the best player, the most outstanding player in the nation." And I said, "So that's what I did. I voted for the most outstanding player in the nation." And he just ridiculed me on live radio. And you know, it's like when I tell this story, I always say, well, here we are, you know, 40 years later, I rest my case.
Absolutely. You remember the catch he made in that game?
Running across the middle and reaching back behind.
The slant. I don't know if I've ever seen a better catch at full speed. Well, he really wasn't at full speed. He was at maybe fourth gear, but then he hit that fifth gear that he always had.
His hands.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, his hands were unbelievable, but I know we're going on about this game, but one of the most memorable things to me was Ike Holt, who covered him. He held him on every play.
Yep.
Every play, and it may have been you that asked him after the game. It was one of our writers that asked him after the game, and he said, "Well, Coach Cassim said they ain't gonna call it every time."
Yeah, that was my sidebar. I was doing a sidebar in that game, and Ike Holt was versus Rice was my story.
They can't call it every time, Ike.
Ike was pretty good too.
He was really good. He went on and played in the league too.
Yeah, he did.
They had a few matchups in the NFL.
Yeah. Interesting time in Mississippi when you look around at the college football coaches in Mississippi now.
Oh yeah.
Mike Leach, Lane Kiffin, Deion Sanders. Come on.
It will be extremely interesting to watch and see, you know, how all this pans out with Deion Sanders. I mean, I'm just a key thing will be how long it holds his interest. You know, here's a guy that's done everything in sports at the very highest level, and now he's coming to a school that doesn't have the facilities. You know, the stadium hadn't been full for a long time. You know, maybe he can do it. We'll see.
He says he was called from God. I give him credit for following his faith here.
Well, he's got his work cut out for him.
Well, you know, you talk about Deion and keeping his interest. You've been doing this now, like you said, since you were 13. What keeps your interest in going and still writing about games, about athletes? What is it that still keeps you getting up every day and saying, this is what I want to do?
The people. It's just the people. I mean, we're just right, you know. Every game is a different passion play. Every game is you know, yeah, it's the same sport, it's the same stadiums, but it's something different happens every time, and it's new people doing it. And you know, I've said it a million times over the years that I don't write so much about the games as I do the people that play them and coach them, and that's what keeps it interesting for me.
Always.
I mean, where else, Mississippi, could you have written about, you know, Walter Payton, Charlie Connerly, Archie Manning, Brett Favre, and then that little cornerback from where, you know?
And all those guys came from small towns.
Oh yeah, you got, you got the second leading rusher in NFL history who's from a town of about 5,000 or 6,000. The leading receiver in NFL history and score who's from a community that's measured in hundreds, not thousands. Yeah. You know, you got the second leading passer now in NFL history who's from the banks of Rotten Bayou in Kiel, Mississippi. I mean, you go on, you got the patriarch of the first family of American football who's from Drew, Mississippi, a little bitty town up in the Delta. And you got the total offense leader in college football history who's from Mount Olive, Mississippi.
From Mount Olive. Yeah.
Tiny, tiny place.
I was coming through Drew one day, coming back from somewhere, and I stopped and took a picture of the city limit sign and texted it to Archie. Mm-hmm. He wrote me back and said, "Are you lost?" You know.
That's Archie.
He said, "What are you doing in this small town today?" You know. But
yeah. But you know,
I have people ask me this sometime, and it's always hard for me to answer. But do you have a favorite story that you've done?
Not a just one story. I wrote a column about my dad, you know, when he was getting on up there and wasn't doing very well, and that column probably means more to me. But as far as a favorite one, there's one story that I've told at 3 different times over the years, and it was the coach at Tishomingo. They call it Tisch High School up in northeast Mississippi, who the wrong way play. Herbert Lee.
Love that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been a really favorite story. I mean, column, because of the, you know, for those who don't know the story, the coach who his team had to win by more, the last game of the season by 4 points or more, and to go to the playoffs, and they led by 2 with time for 1 play left, and they had the ball at the other team's 45, and he's coaching from the back of a pickup truck in the end zone because he's got ALS, and his body's quit working, but his mind is still sharp, and he figures the best way, the only chance they got, is to run backwards, take a safety, and then try to score a touchdown and win in overtime. And they did it.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
That's 1A football.
1A football.
Yeah.
There's another one that was really close to me because I had, I grew up not far from Scuba, Mississippi, and I had cousins who lived there, and so in the summers I'd go see them, and they were friends with the coach at Scuba.
Yeah.
Last Chance U for the people who just know it that way now, East Mississippi Community College.
Scuba
But
Tech.
they were friends with the Sullivans and Coach Bull. He was a towering guy, you know, and I knew he was a pretty good coach. Didn't understand why his players didn't wear face masks and had skull and crossbones on the side of their helmets. But you wrote a story that turned out to have more legs. I mean, you mind sharing that with?
Well, you know, actually, I was proud of that for a couple of reasons. Number one, that whole idea of that series that we did back then at the Clarion Ledger had been my idea, is that you go to small towns around Mississippi and you find the best story in that town.
Yeah.
And you tell that story. And we called it traveling. And we did. We sent a guy could go spend a couple days at that and do the best story in the history of that town. And one of mine was scuba. And I went over there, and God, the more that I heard about this guy, you know, this coach who, like you say, they could fold their helmets, and they did, and put them in the back of their pants while they warmed up. You know. And you know, and then I heard the story about the goal line drill when they had a pond down by the field, and he would take the whole team down to the pond and line the defense up on the edge of the pond, and then tell the offense, okay, now drown them.
And tell the defense, you better not go in that pond.
Yeah, right. And you know, he had different ways of motivating people. Let's put it that way. But so I did the story. It ran in the Clarion Ledger on a Saturday morning, and somebody left their Clarion Ledger on the plane in Birmingham, where Frank DeFord got on the plane.
Great writer for Sports Illustrated.
One of the greatest sports writers in history. Maybe the best. And he read that story, and then he spent like 2 or 3 months working on what turned out to be the longest cover story in Sports Illustrated history.
Think about that.
Yeah, and the best I ever read. It was, I mean, he just.
Oh, it was fabulous. Your story was fabulous.
Well, my story was good. His was otherworldly. It was so good, and people still, it still gets a lot of hits on the Sports Illustrated webs. People still go back and reread it all the time.
Oh yeah, it solved the mystery for me too, because I always thought that their uniforms, Scuba's uniforms on Coach Bull, were sort of gaudy. You know, they had these 5 stars.
Yeah.
I think it was 5 across the front, and I was like, I don't know about that, you know. And then I read in Frank DeFord's story where that was a way of Coach Bull honoring 5 people
in his platoon.
At
Iwo Jima.
At Iwo Jima, yeah. And it made me feel really bad for not liking those uniforms sooner, you know. But that's just the kind of guy he was.
Part of his coaching methods, Bill Buckner, another Mississippi
Great
Sports
guy.
Hall of Famer, who's passed away, was his quarterback. And they were going to win the national championship the year he was there, and then he got his jaw broken, and they lost the game. But Buckner told me the story of one time in practice, he threw a bad pass, made a bad read, threw a bad pass. And he said, Sullivan told him, son, I killed 50 gooks at Iwo Jima. One more ain't gonna matter.
And he meant it probably.
Well, the important thing is that Buckner thought he meant
Buckner
it.
thought he did.
Yeah.
Rick, I think the biggest compliment I can give you is that, well, 2. One is you have always been a trusted, loyal friend to me, and I appreciate that so much.
But that's reciprocal.
Well, when you look at the Mississippi sports landscape, I can't imagine it without Rick Cleveland. And you've told so many great stories. and you were head of our sports department for a good while, and I thought elevated us to be as good as really as any sports department in the country. I really felt like that at the time. You look around the room, and there were some incredible people there, but you were the leader of a lot of that.
We were really good.
Really good.
I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, before what happened to newspapers happened, you know, it was, I have people, I don't care where I'm being, Pontotoc or Petal, and people come up and tell me how much they missed the Sunday morning or Saturday morning Clarion Ledger, you know. And that means a lot.
Yeah.
We had a great staff. I mean, as you well know, we won all kinds of national awards. But a lot of it was we were telling great stories. I mean, Mississippi provided so much.
All these people.
Yeah, look around.
Yeah.
We had plenty to tell about.
But you've had your hand in so much of it. This museum, just the incredible stories through the years, and you're still doing it. How much longer you think you'll do it?
Probably as long as they let me. As long as that keyboard will hang in there.
Stand up to the pounding, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you know, now doing it for Mississippi Today is what I'm doing now, doing 2 or 3 columns a week for Mississippi Today. It's the best, it really is the best job I've ever had, because I write about what interests me, what I want to write about, and I work out of my house, and
Not bad.
yeah, it's a great situation, and now at Mississippi Today, I'm trying to tell more. It's not nearly as much X's and O's even as it was at the Clarion. I never was, you know, I never was much into the X's and O's. It's more, but telling Mississippi sports stories in the way that they affect our culture, and sports is such a big part of our Mississippi culture. You know, I mean, look at the flag issue, and how big a role sports played in our finally getting the flag changed. I mean, I'll never forget being down at the Capitol, and here's Leach, here's Kiffin, here's Kermit Davis, here's all these great coaches.
All over the state.
Yeah.
Just about every school was here, I guess.
And it made a difference.
Oh, no question.
It made a difference. I'm not sure it would have happened had it not been. And there are a lot of people that played a part in that. But that just goes to show how big a part of our culture sports are.
Well, please keep doing what you're doing.
You too,
for
buddy.
as long as you can.
You too, buddy. I can't tell you how many times I read something you've written and say, man, I wish I'd have written that.
Well, vice versa, I promise you that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you doing this with us, and I'm sure the people out there are going to really enjoy your insight and your takes, and just appreciate what you do for Mississippi.
Well,
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Billy.